And because they've been working with multiplication and division problems for the last couple of weeks, today I just did a review where they did a sort activity where they had a whole bunch of story problems and we had a bunch of keywords posted, the multiplication keywords and the division. And with a partner, they sorted them into 2 piles. And they actually were very successful with that. It was a review for them, and I knew it was, and they didn't seem to have many problems with that, especially with being able to work with each other and having the resources around the room. I saw them checking the keywords, but they knew how to check the keywords. They knew how to highlight them. So they seemed fine with that. And so we moved on to working through the 4 steps together as a class. I modeled it for them. They seemed to do pretty well. I have to say they were struggling with thinking of a second strategy when we were talking about it. All of them have, or most of them have, one strategy for multiplication and division that is just their go-to strategy. And they know how to do it, but when asked to show it a second way, they get pretty confused. So that was an area. And when they went to go work on it themselves today, I noticed that that was the problem that they had too. So they spent this afternoon working with a partner, doing all 4 steps on 1 multiplication and 1 division problem. And interestingly enough, even though they were doing fine with the planning when they were sorting the problem, when they had to do the problems themselves, they had a lot of trouble. You can see here, she added in the plan instead of multiplying it.
She changed her answer.
And then she changed it. So that was something that I did not think was going to be difficult because they had seemed to understand it. Same here. I think it was a little bit about the choice of the numbers because the numbers were 15 and 3. I think they thought they were going to multiply them because the fact family.
Exactly.
But they struggled a lot more with that than I thought. What I noticed most of all was especially on the multiplication problem, which I had not expected they would struggle with. They did not plan correctly.
And the plan is the most difficult step in this whole process because if you have the wrong plan, because you haven't carefully understood, then your whole process is mixed up.
Exactly. Yeah, you can see this child one thing I noticed with this group especially, they're very eager to exceed the standard. So as soon as they learn a different way, so he actually did 2 strategies here, but both were for the wrong problem. So
he used the wrong operation.
He used the wrong operation at first.
Okay.
And then I noticed today, as expected, the check was difficult for them, showing a different strategy. Some of my lower students got much more motivated to try to show more strategies and went back and added a lot when they were working with a partner who could actually explain another strategy for them. So that's when I think some of the kids really started adding more information in. So that's what we did today. I think just what I learned, what I'm going to take away for tomorrow is to make sure that we're focusing on how to accurately plan and then also the check. It was sort of what I expected them to struggle on. So tomorrow really is a second day of working on very similar problems, and I think they're going to need that because they didn't have the mastery yet so that we could really move on. So luckily the lesson was planned that way.
Yeah, so it seems like the focus it'll be the same practice of the same skill, but the focus can switch to what are some multiple strategies, and then using, I guess this is easier for division than multiplication, but if it was a division word problem, they could use multiplication to check instead of a different division strategy using the inverse. That's trickier with multiplication though.
Right.
Because using division as a check is very hard for 3rd grade.
Mm-hmm. But they didn't fall into a lot of pitfalls that I was afraid of, which was nice. For instance, I've seen kids in the past in this group, they solve an answer and then get a completely different answer for the check and move on without realizing. So I think that they're really getting used to this format. So a lot of the pitfalls I was afraid of didn't happen today, so I'm not going to have to address that. With the understanding, almost every single child is doing a great job with circling the numbers and underlining the keywords. So those are things that I was really happy to see that you're right, I won't have to focus on tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So tomorrow my plan is we're going to start the lesson. We're going to start the lesson with a chalk talk because there is such a variety of understandings of how to do the different steps in the word problems, solution. They're going to use each other as resources, and they're going to get in a small group of 5 students, they're going to do a chalk talk and try to explain what they know about each of these 4 boxes.
So every group is going to have
Sort
the
of a
same
blank,
chalk talk, or
yeah, they're each
okay.
going to have the same chalk talk, which is going to be a blank outline of this, not even with these 4 things. One interesting mistake that I didn't anticipate today that came out when we were doing a turn and talk was they thought the 4 operations were understand, plan, solve, and check instead of addition, subtraction.
Okay.
So we're going to work on that as a group. We're not necessarily going to spend too much time going back over the math because I think such a significant portion of the kids have it that I may just pull small groups to talk about ways to do 2 strategies. Looking at the work they did today, there's clearly about 5 or 6 kids who need to review how to do a second strategy for division, how to do a second strategy for multiplication. But a lot of them have a really good grasp on that. So what I'm going to let them do is the vast majority of the students are going to work independently. A few kids I'm going to get to revisit this mathematics, and I already actually started doing that this afternoon. I had a little bit of time and just went over with a couple of them, how do we solve a multiplication problem? How do we solve a division
Strategies like
problem?
skip counting, using
Exactly.
a picture. Okay.
Keeping the 2 of them straight. That's one of the things I'm seeing in this too, that they can use, that they get confused. So I think I'm going to
And
have...
just kids' different learning styles too. Some kids need a break and want to work on something independently, and some would rather interact with other kids.
And I think I'm going to do a mix with that of some of the students I'm going to ask to do certain extensions, and some of them I'll let them choose. For the most part, the kids have responded so well to the self-assessment strategies that they often pick the one that I would pick for them independently, which is really great. Mm-hmm. They know themselves as learners really well. So they'll say to me, you know what, I don't think I really understand how to check. Can I do a problem on myself? So typically there's just a little bit of gentle steering. I don't have to be too bossy about which they pick.
Yeah, they're definitely getting very comfortable with these strategies.
Mm-hmm. And then at the very end of the lesson, I have a copy of this where they can stop, light it, and just show me. This is an exercise that we do a lot, and it's their favorite thing to do. They each get 1 green sticker and 1 red sticker, and as their ticket to leave, they put a green sticker on the learning target that they understand best, and a red sticker on the learning target that they most want to review. The kids love to do it because I think they feel very comfortable in saying what they're going to get wrong because they know that doesn't just go away, that the next morning we typically start the lesson with going over whichever learning target they've picked. So they really like the chance to be able to show me. It's also anonymous because once you put the stickers up, nobody knows where you put your sticker.
Okay, so is it going to be one large poster and each kid is going to stick their red and their green on the same one? Mm-hmm. And then as a class, you can visually see where the majority of the greens and reds are.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they get a sense too of what the class needs to work on. But I think for the most part, they like to sort of know that they also get to know that they're not alone in being confused.
And they're part of the group, and everybody has, having every kid identify what they're struggling with. Maybe they're struggling a little, maybe they're struggling a lot, but that takes that whole part out of it. And so everybody's saying what my weakness is, and that's helpful. Good
morning, 3rd graders. Good morning, Miss Swan. This morning we're going to look back over the learning targets that we worked on yesterday for solving word problems. We're going to look at the 4 different rooms and we're going to continue to work on solving multiplication and division word problems and thinking about how to meet the criteria of success, how to do the best job. So what we're going to start doing is beginning at your table with a chalk talk. Each of you are going to get a blank organizer, and with your table, you're going to have a silent conversation about what is expected in every step. Help your table mates remember what you need to do. The one thing that I want you to be careful to do today is each kid at your table is going to take a different color marker. so I can tell what you're writing. We're going to move to your tables. I have a chalk talk for each desk. Get ready by getting a different color marker than every kid at your table.
Can you look up the map? Can we come over and look at it if you're sure?
If you're not sure. But Jenny, mostly use your peers. All right, I love the way table 2 all has a different color marker. Put it in the trash. I see that table 4 is already starting their conversation. All right, get silent and begin. Cap your markers, third graders. Nice work, third graders. I saw a lot of ideas on your chalk talk. I think that most kids are really ready to start to think about what is the criteria of success for each of the rooms in the UPS company organizer. So the first thing we need to do when we get the organizer is make sure that you can label it. And I think you guys are ready to do this. Edwin, how do we label each room?
Label them, like understand,
What letter?
U, plan, P, solve, and check. Explain.
Good. That last one, which it can be a little bit harder to remember, but is incredibly important, is the explain at the bottom. We're going to start with the understand, and I want you guys to talk with a neighbor about what is the criteria, the green and the blue, that you need to show in the understand. Go ahead and turn and talk. What do you need to do?
Put uncheck and circle and
Twice, because rereading can be a really important strategy just in this situation. What do you think, Caroline? All right, turn back to the front. We're going to use the call sticks for talking about how you can meet the criteria in the understand box. If I call on you, you can use your partner as a helper. Go ahead, Madison, talk to us about the understand criteria.
Understand box is when you circle and underline the important words, and you can't just underline words and circle just to go on to the plan next.
Circle and underline. I like what she said. Key or important words, not just any words. You need to have the words that actually help you. I'm going to say key words. Good. Did you and your partner have any other strategies that were helpful for the understand box?
Not really.
No? Let's see. There are a couple more things that you might want to use in the understand box. Johanny.
In the understand, you can
can visualize.
Yeah, you can visualize. I recommend making a movie of the situation, a movie in your mind. If you're confused about what is happening, just like in reading a book, making a movie is really helpful. Taylor, what's one more thing that's really helpful?
You can reread and circle and underline the important information.
Good. Circle and underline the important information or reread. These are all things that you can be doing in the understand box. If you want to exceed the standard, I recommend rewriting the question in your own words. That shows me that you really understand what you need to do. I see a lot of me too, so kids are thinking about that.
Like you can write, that I reread or something.
Ah, you can explain the strategies you used. Explain your strategies. So that the person who's looking at your paper really understands them. All right, let's go ahead and think about what you need to do. Now, this box is extremely difficult. I think this is the most difficult box. It seems simple because you don't write a lot, but there is a lot of thinking that needs to go into planning. So when you talk to your partner, I really want you to think back to what we did yesterday. This was a troublesome box. Think about the 4 operations that we're working on: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Think about how you can figure them out. Go ahead and turn and talk. All right, turn back to the front.
How much money did you get?
Oh, he's not here today. We'll take out his stick. Katya, what do we need to do in the plan box?
Have to write your number sentence.
You have to write a number sentence. And Katya, in that number sentence, what do you need to figure out?
You have to figure out what you're gonna plan for the song, what you're gonna do.
So what do we call those? What? Help her out, Madison. Are you her partner? The operations, right? So what are the 4 operations?
Plus, minus.
So you need to figure out the operations. I heard 2, Katya.
Add, subtraction, multiplication, and division.
Very good. This is not easy. Julia.
For exceeding the standard, you can write how you figured out the number sentence.
Can you give an example of what you might say?
If it was multiplication, it's said there were 3 buckets and 5 was in each one. It would be 3 times 5.
And what would you explain?
Explaining it by saying, I figured out the number since there's 3 buckets and 5 in each. I know it's multiplication, and I know it's not a division because the smaller number went first.
Good. And Julia's also sort of taking us back to those key words. Maybe telling how you knew what the key words or what the numbers are telling you. Julia was knowing that she was starting with a large number. You might also want to say, if I know that it's multiplication, because you're putting together equal groups. Turn and whisper talk about the expectations in the solve. Okay, turn towards the front. And Caroline, when I was stopping and talked to her, gave me a second thing for plan that I hadn't thought of for exceeding the standard. But I wanted to share it with you because I thought it was a really good idea. Caroline, what's a second way that you can exceed the standard in planning?
You can plan it in more than one way. Like if you had 5 times 3, you could do 15 times 3. You could do 15 times 3 and 3 15 times.
Did you hear that? You can write more than one number sentence. 3 15 times or 15 3 times. You could also use repeated addition. Okay, let's look at our solve. And I'm going to call on the group in the back because they did a really good job talking about how do you meet, let's start with meeting the standard. How do you meet the standard?
You shouldn't just write the number sentence and the answer. You should show your work.
Kevin, can you tell them what that means? Because I think you hear that a lot and you don't know exactly what to do.
If it's 15 times 3, you shouldn't write 15 times 3 is, and then the answer, you should draw a picture or skip count.
Yeah, by showing or writing your strategy. What Kevin's saying is don't just put down an answer. Show or write down what you did to get there. What's another thing that you need to do just to meet this standard before we go on to exceeding? That group? Ryan, you want to help them out?
You can, instead of just writing one number sentence, you can write like 24 divided by 6 equals 4. So 4 times 6 equals 24.
So it's another way of showing your work by showing or writing the strategy. What I want to make sure you realize before you move on to exceeding is you need to solve accurately. You don't want to move on unless you're sure you've done your math correctly. Kids get into trouble making sure that you're regrouping correctly, making sure you're skip counting correctly. This needs to be correct. Now, how do you exceed the standard? And I'll let Julia finish off in that group.
Instead of like doing mental math, which you're thinking in your head, you can write it on the paper.
Okay, so I think it's this again. Johanny?
You can write like you can do it 2 ways.
To exceed, show more than one strategy. Solve the same problem in a different way. The last room is the check, and then we need to talk to the explain. Now think carefully. What is the job of the check that's slightly different than the solve? They're different rooms. So what do you need to do in the check?
Really good. You need to
All right. I'm hearing a lot of good information about how the checkbox is different than the solve. Kelsey and your partner, can you share with us?
The checkbox has to check if you got the answer right on the solve.
You have to use this to check the answer from the solve. How do you do that, Kelsey, or your partner?
You'll use the inverse operation.
The inverse operation is a great idea. Another way, Kelsey?
Or you could use estimation.
Estimation. Brianna?
If it's minus, then you check with plus.
So I hear by using the inverse, estimation is a really good thing to use. Or a second strategy. This box, I think it's hard to exceed the standard. I think if you really want to do it, you may go ahead and use more than one check strategy. Jenna and Sarah.
If something's wrong, then you know you have to check back.
Good, Jenna. Yes, good. That's definitely meeting the standard.
You have to go back to the solve and check and try it again and then see if you get your right answer.
If it doesn't check, very good. Third graders have to stop. You cannot see that it doesn't check and then just go on to explain. Part of why you do this is to say to yourself, something is not correct here. I need to redo my solve or redo my check. Very good point, Jenna. If it doesn't check, you must go back and fix your work. Kyle.
You can also skip count.
Yep, and that's what I'm saying here is a second strategy. Does that make sense? Molly?
use the same strategy twice.
Good. Don't use the same strategy twice. That doesn't really help you check. Because if you can make a mistake in it here, if you use the exact same strategy here, you can do the same thing wrong. So today, you're going to work with your partner on 2 different word problems. You and your partner are both going to have a sheet, and you both need to write down the answer. I will come around and stop your work, give you the stickers to help you see where you're meeting the standard and where you're exceeding it. You and your partner both need to write down your own answer. When you finish, you have 2 choices, and you can make a different choice than your partner. You may either go ahead and take another sheet of word problems and just practice independently. If you feel like you would like to work through this on your own, go ahead and do so by yourself. If you prefer to think about the criteria, you have colored dots in your pencil baskets. Find a new partner and stoplight their work for them. Make sure that you're helpful. You give them feedback that shows them how to meet the standard, and they're clear on what to do. And let me just give you one more direction, then I'll take questions. If you feel from yesterday, and I think this was true for a couple of the groups, that you really are confused with how to solve a multiplication or a division problem correctly, if you feel like you need to go back over that, go to the back table and I'll work with you and your partner just to make sure that you guys have at least one solid strategy to solve. Go ahead and I will put the sheets in the middle of your table. Find your partner. Each of you need to fill out your own sheets. Head to the back table if you need some help on a solve. Talk to your partner whether that's a good choice for you guys. So even if the solve is difficult, I still want you to go ahead and do the understand clearly. The first 2 steps I think you guys can work on, meeting the standards that we put up on the board, and then when we look at the solves, I'll go over the different strategies you can use. But you do need to understand what the question is asking you first. What word? There's another word in there that you did not underline that tells you what it is. All together helps you. Yes. Good. Okay. I see a lot of skip counting here. It's a smart multiplication strategy. It's a good strategy. And so far, this is meeting the standard, and you're exceeding the standard for this understanding because you show me circling and underlining, and that you can restate the question in your own words. Good. Was there any part that was difficult for you two?
I think the explain is going to be the most difficult because of the new part. I didn't know about the because before.
I'm going to put a red here because I'm not seeing the multiplication in this picture. You guys did a really excellent job working to meet the standards. I saw a lot of people making choices to meet the standard, and other people who found it not as difficult to meet the standard, going ahead and pushing themselves to exceed it. I'm going to give you 2 stickers. On this poster are all of the I can statements for each room. Each kid is going to take a green and a red. Put the green sticker by the standard that you feel the most comfortable with, and the red by the one that's most challenging. And we'll look at this tomorrow.
Alice, how'd the lesson go today?
It went really well. I think I saw a lot of interesting things.
What came up on the Chalk Talk?
Well, take a look and tell me what you notice. They love doing this activity,
Yeah,
as
it looks
always.
so different.
Yeah.
Wow. So it looks like some interesting things we talked about yesterday came up on here. Because we were mostly focusing, I think, on the plan and the kids having enough strategies to solve different ways. So this group did really well with the having a bunch of strategies: fact triangle, repeated addition, pictures, skip counting.
Mm-hmm. That same.
Oh yeah, this group had using the inverse, which was I see it here too. Do the inverse operation or a different strategy, which is good because I think yesterday they were having a hard time figuring out what they should do in that box.
A
What do we have
lot
for
of
the
them were
plan?
exceeding the standard.
Yeah, I
they were
see blue
very,
stuff.
Yeah, they were very
Are they
excited.
color coding stuff with blue?
Some of
This
it was
one looks
mine.
like
They
it
all
is.
had different colors. Some of the questions in blue, I went around. I kept asking them a lot of
This is your
how
question.
questions because I noticed that they can say like check. You know, I can check my answer, but how is eliciting a little deeper understanding.
Exactly. And then they have some specific answers. I don't know if this person got that.
For
What's on this one?
plan, I like to try to think about what you're gonna do.
Think about what, yep, number sentence, so the beginning of a number sentence. But the work, that's not, that seems like a little misconception there. Plan your work, not do the work.
That's
In
interesting.
the beginning of a number sentence, not having your entire problem solved already at that point. So this one says, work on your plan. How do you make a good plan? Write out what you are going to do in words in a number sentence.
I thought that was great though. I liked how they were asking each other
A
questions.
question, yeah.
Because I think sometimes
looks like
they're shy.
They all have the big ideas of the understand. Circle and underline, put a check when you're done in the box. So it looks like they're good with that. And they seem to be understanding better about the multiple strategies, but there isn't a lot about the plan still.
That's interesting because you're going to see as we go through their work, I noticed that the plan continued to be a weakness throughout the lesson. I was happy to see, because I remember I was telling you yesterday that they weren't remembering the different rooms. And that seemed, for the most part, that they got that understand, plan, solve, and check.
They all seem to be in the right place. Yeah, and all four of them. And the explain too.
Yep.
Because I don't know if actually doing this was easier for them today, but I think the explain part you were saying yesterday was going to be hard for some of them.
And that's great. Asking questions to each other. That's what I've noticed. The more we've done the chalk talk, the more comfortable they're getting with actually getting information from each other. So anything else I should notice?
No, I mean, it kind of looks like we covered all of the ideas that I see here.
All right, well, I'll show you then. So we went on from there. This was sort of our activator. They did this based on what they remembered from yesterday. And they took a gallery walk just so that they could see what other students
Did they
had
notice
written.
kind of similar things on everyone's chart when the kids were looking at them?
And it was interesting too. They kept, for the first time today, they were like, "Can we take a marker and start writing on other people's charts at
Wow.
the end of it?" Because I think they saw questions that were unanswered, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, shows they're really thinking. They really understand the activity. They're really thinking about the point of a conversation about
And
something.
reading it, not just sort of looking at the different colors. And so I've definitely seen evolution in how they're speaking to each other on these and not just working independently. It's really
Right.
a conversation.
Right.
So then we moved from there and we worked as a class to create some different criteria of success. And I did what I was talking to you about using
Oh, yes,
the green,
using the
and,
green
the blue.
and blue. Excellent. So did the kids kind of brainstorm these all together and you took everyone's ideas, what they had talked about on the chalk talk, and then put it all together into some specific.
And what was so fascinating, which I think shows how motivated these kids are, is that they wanted to almost, I felt like I had to force them to go back to working on just meeting the standard. They were so interested
Yeah.
in
It's a very motivated
exceeding
group,
the standard.
which is nice, but they have to be worried about getting the basics down before.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes they can forget that you need to do one strategy accurately is better than 3 inaccurate.
Exactly.
And I think we have to work on making sure that they
Slowing them down, keeping them from kind of rushing through it to get to more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Less is more. That's what we talk about a lot.
I think with their
Sometimes less is
mindset, that's definitely the balance of how to do it well, not just more.
Did they come up with this idea, or did you kind of?
They
Squeeze this out of 'em.
They came up with most of these ideas. I have to say, I think the chalk talk worked really well to get them to elicit these ideas. I didn't
Right,
have
because
to
yesterday
pick
you
them.
were saying that there were kids who had a different answer in the solve and check, and they didn't even realize they had to fix something. So it's good that they came up with that idea for this.
Yeah.
And
that
then they
was
can,
finished.
go back to it and say, if you had the kids had their piece of work and you asked them to check it against this, are all of these things true? Eventually they would get to this, and if that hadn't been true, hopefully they'd be able to catch it for themselves.
And I think our conversation yesterday helped me a little bit because when I presented check to them, I made sure to say, this isn't a second solve box. How are they different? And I think that made it easier to elicit that you have to go back and fix it
Right.
if it doesn't
That the
work.
check can be a second way to solve, but that's not what check means. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like estimation too. We didn't talk about that yesterday, but that's a great idea for them to kind of get a sense of whether their answer is reasonable, because I think that's really hard for kids. But it can be a great way to check.
So they were very enthusiastic about this. And I think one thing I just want to continue to point out to them is you can't exceed the standard, but you need to be solid on meeting the standard first. Because I'll show you some of their work. I think, especially with the planning, they were so eager to get to the next step. They weren't always doing everything they needed to do first.
Right. And when they miss out on this, they miss out on everything else, and that's the whole meat of it.
So I haven't looked through these too much.
Okay.
But I thought we
These
could
are
do
these
that
stickers
now.
that you had given.
There's a mix. Some of the students reached the extension project where they were able to, so I gave them two choices. One of them was to stoplight another group's
Right,
paper
I remember
with a new
you said
partner,
that, yep.
and another one was to work individually. They were really excited to stoplight each other's rather than work individually. Which I asked them to give reasons why, and they gave great reasons. They said things like, it helps me to learn new strategies when I see someone else doing it, or I like to know how someone else sees my work. So I thought that was really interesting. They like to say, I like to know whether or not I really exceeded the standard.
Yeah, from what you heard them say to each other, did it seem like they were giving good feedback?
I think so. I think that they were really working on that. I think that's one of the things that I sort of put in my mind that I'd like to give them some more time to continue with, because you're going to see a lot of them, especially the ones like the student who are working to exceed the standard in every box. She didn't even get to the second problem.
Okay. Yes, you may have to do some readjusting of the general expectations
Yes.
of their work to.
That's a hard balance.
It is a hard balance, really hard balance, especially when you have a group of motivated kids and they see some kids getting to that step and then they want to get to that step, but
They don't know. And that might be a conversation to have with my top learners, which is when do you just meet the standard and when do you push yourself to exceed it? So these are some samples that I wanted to pull out too, because I started to notice that there are one or two students, this is an example, and you can see she made herself a sad face, which is, she knows that this was really hard, where she wasn't able to solve 9 times 7.
But it looks like she knew she needed to do 9 times 7.
She got that. I think she has 9 there, and then she added 7 more because she has 16.
Right. She tried to make a fact family.
But put 16.
Right.
So I think for her case, I can see there's some real
It's
misunderstanding.
almost like she knew she needed to skip count, but she didn't know what to skip count by. Because, that's what these circles are. That's how you
interesting.
show them skip counting, right? Like the circles usually represent it. But she counted by ones.
So I think that there's a group of kids, and she's definitely
Show
one,
honey stickers. Yeah.
where I need to just work on the multiplication and division strategies. So I think that's really interesting because I'll show you their exit card. I think it reflects the same problem of what we just saw, whereas the plan for the whole class is a little tricky, and then the actual mathematics of multiplication and division
Right.
is tricky
And
for a few
for those
kids.
kids that had a hard time with it, with this kind of simple multiplication problem, they're not going to be ready to move on tomorrow to doing the multi-step ones. So that's going to have
Well,
to
I'll
be
show you so this was their exit slip, and it was really clear. And the kids were even laughing about it after the lesson because they were saying, well, that's what we need to work on tomorrow
Right.
when they saw this, because it was just really clear that they found the plan the most difficult step. So looking at this, I was thinking that tomorrow the place to start would obviously be with a whole group lesson on reteaching how to plan, because they're showing me really clearly, and I want to respect and make sure we follow up on what they care
Absolutely.
about, that they want to talk about this some more.
Is there any other time before the math lesson they might be able to do that?
What I can do is let them work on it while I pull a small group to work on the students who are not
That's a
yet
great idea.
accurately
And
solving.
maybe you had talked yesterday about an extension that the kids didn't really choose. They had chose to stop late other kids instead of working on a more challenging problem. So maybe have a more challenging problem. If they're finished with those two, that the kids can work on, so it'll kind of keep everything.
And I think
calm
rather
while
than
you
move
grab.
forward to a multi-step, because the plan is going to take on even more importance.
Exactly.
If they're still feeling this shaky about it, I think it's probably worth slowing it down rather than taking them to the multi-step.
I agree.
Good morning, third graders. Today, before we started, I just want to show you the general learning target for the math unit we're working on. Kelsey, can you come read the math learning target in a nice loud voice for everyone?
I can solve word problems using addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division.
So that's what we've been working on for the last 2 days. The big idea is that you guys need to be able to solve a word problem using addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. Now, we broke that down into steps to make it a little bit easier. So now you can turn and look up at the UPSC organizer that we did yesterday. There are 5 different smaller learning targets that all help us get to the big idea. It's broken down into 5 different rooms so that you can work through the word problems. Word problems are really difficult, so you need to do a lot of different steps in order to serve them accurately. To get to that main idea, that big idea, you need to do a bunch of little I cans. And it's helpful for us to break them into parts because we can see what's difficult. So, turn and whisper talk to a partner. Let me just make sure everyone has a partner and I'll tell you the question. Get knee to knee, eye to eye. Good, a lot of kids are really close so that they can have a good conversation and they can hear each other. Looking at the 5 I cans, what do we need to focus on today? Go ahead and discuss. So looking at our 5 different I can statements, what do you think that we need to work on today? Johanny,
I think that we need to work on the plan
how do you know?
because a lot of people don't feel that good about it.
I completely agree. I see a lot of me too's. It's pretty clear from looking at this that this is where we need to focus today. And we may need to revisit the check too, but I want to start with this room because I can see that this I can statement is the most difficult. So what I did was, first of all, what I think you need to think about are these key words. We're just going to look at multiplication and division. I moved these over so that you guys have a little bit of a clearer idea. These key words are one of the most important things in the plan box. Figuring out a number sentence is difficult because you need to know which operation. These key words are going to tell you what operation. But, and this is where I think some kids were having difficulty yesterday, I think that when we get to multiplication and division, there are certain key words that can mean more than one operation. Look at equal groups. It could be division or it could be times. Look at all together. It could be times or it could be addition. How do you know which operation it is when a keyword has more than one that it can work with. Turn and whisper talk about that. I'll let Irene start because she had a really good point. Irene and Edwin were having a good conversation, and then I'll use the sticks.
Like if you have all together and each, then you'll know it's gonna be multiplication because there's 2 words that are times and only 1 word that's addition.
Interesting. So you may have to look for a second keyword. Anything to add? What do you think, Julia, and your partner? Is there any other way besides finding 2 keywords?
Sometimes you know that it's not division if the lower number goes first.
Think about the numbers. Are they giving you the product in the word problem? If they are, you're usually going to have a division. Are they giving you the total? Or are they giving you 2 factors? Are the numbers equal? Then you're probably multiplying. If they're unequal, it's addition or subtracting. Think about what they're asking you. Good. All right. Here's what I think we're going to do. Show me on your personal stoplights how you feel about the plan room. Some people might be changing from these yesterday. Show me on your stoplight, sweetie. Interesting. Okay, so I see that some people feel a little bit better now, but some people still feel like we need a couple more examples to talk about it. Let's go ahead and use the baby whiteboards. So, hold on. Okay, so that we can practice the plan learning target without getting overwhelmed. All we're going to do today with the whiteboards is think about understanding, because you can't plan unless you know what the question's asking you, and then the planning. I can plan to figure out the correct operation for a word problem. You guys are not going to have to do the other steps. Today we're just going to look at planning the number sentence out so that we can really focus on that tricky part. So, the first thing you need to do is understand. Who would like to come up, circle and underline for us? Jack. Tell us why you circled and underlined what you did.
I circled the numbers because you might, because the bigger number, it could be, you could be multiplying or dividing. And I circled flower, I underlined each banquet because it could, that's division because how many in each banquet. And she made, that means that she put them into.
Good. He did that. Put your finger on your nose that if you feel like you've understood the word problem. Finger on noses. He used just one strategy, circling and underlining, but I also heard him reread it. I don't know whether some of you visualized it, but if you don't feel like you understand, that may be the third thing that you can do. Now, looking at the numbers, the way that Julia explained to us, thinking about, are they giving us the total here? Are they giving us 2 factors? Looking at the key words, the way that Edwin and Irene talked to us about it. Go ahead and see if you can write just the number sentence on your whiteboard. If you need to draw a picture because you're stuck, go ahead and do that too. When you're finished, put it on your lap so I can see it. Good. How do you know to put that number? If you finish the plan, put it on your lap and hold it up so I can see it. Show it to each other. Interesting. I'm noticing some kids that are feeling pressure to solve. But, board's down. Molly, do you need to solve? Do you need to have an answer in your plan step?
No, because if you solve it, then you must already know the number sentence.
Good. All you need to do for this number sentence is write, for the plan, is just write the operation. That's enough to figure out. You don't need to worry about getting the answer until the solve. Johanny, can you come to the board and write up the number sentence that you have? You see this? You see you made a small mistake there. Alessandra, let me see. You don't need to solve. Can you write just the number sentence? Good. She doesn't have to solve. A lot of you are doing 2 steps in 1. Before you can make an accurate solve, you need to figure out the plan. Grace, explain to us how you knew that the number sentence was 35 divided by 5.
I knew that the number sentence was 35 divided by 5 because there's 2 numbers and the bigger number came before the smaller number, so it was division.
Were there any key words that helped you?
Each.
Each. The other thing to think about is what's happening in the situation. Kelsey is splitting things into equal groups. She's not putting them together, she's splitting them. Any questions? Jenna?
Can you use for the solve, if you know the fact, could you use it in the plan too? Could you use it like, I know 5 times 7 equals 35. Could you use that to help you in the plan?
Not really, because this is not a multiplication situation. You can use the inverse operation to help you solve it, but I think it's too confusing to start to use the inverse right here because there isn't any adding of equal groups going on. There's splitting of equal groups. Good question. You can't skip the plan step. Good. Here's what I want you guys to do. Listen carefully to the directions. Each of you has the UPSC organizer that you worked on yesterday. A lot of you didn't finish, so I want you to work with the same partner and finish, make sure that both questions are finished. Hold on one second. When you finish both sheets, you still have the same options. You may either work with another partner and stoplight their work, or there's another sheet for independent practice of these skills. I am going to call a couple of kids, Jenna, Jack, Alessandra, Edwin. I want to talk to you about your solving. And Brianna expressed an interest in solving that group. If you look at this and you think, I don't know what my next step is, you may join us at the back table for that. Why were you trying to get the answer 9?
Because 9 times 7 equals 63, so 63 divided by 9 has to be... Oh.
What did you just realize there, Jenna?
That if we took this, we could have done that. We wanted to end with 7.
You know what you guys are doing?
Because we were really doing 9 times 9.
Yes, good. Do you see that?
I wasn't going to solve the multiplication problem.
What were you doing? You're exactly right. What were you doing?
I was just drawing a picture of their stickers.
You were drawing a picture of their stickers, and that made you add them. Alessandra, 9 times 7 is, in other words, it's 9 groups of 7. Let me write that down for you. 9 groups of 7. Remember that time sign means groups of. How can you draw 9 groups of 7? Brianna, come sit right here.
I can just draw 9 hoops and 7s.
There we go. And that's gonna give you the correct answer. You drew some of Jenna's stickers and some of Johanna's stickers, which was really drawing adding. You solving a different problem. I see you smiling. What do you feel? You're starting to feel better. Good, you can move on your stoplight. Draw me. Listen carefully, you guys did a great job. Take your math papers, even if they're not complete, and put them in the middle for me to look at. The formative assessment process has really changed my classroom community. The students are much more willing to speak up, to ask questions, and not just yes, no questions or what do we do next? It's much deeper questions. I think that I noticed that they're definitely willing to orally pursue complicated issues, which I think is really impressive for 8 and 9-year-olds to be willing to take that risk and to talk through some of their thinking. Irene and Edwin were having a good conversation, and then I used the sticks.
Like if you have all together and each, then you'll know it's gonna be multiplication because there's 2 words that are times and only 1 word that's addition.
Interesting. So you may have to look for a second keyword. The kids are much more engaged with each other. Instead of just always asking me questions, they're turned to each other and ask each other questions, look for answers from each other, explain mistakes to each other. They seem much less nervous to make a mistake or to ask for some help from one of their peers. So that's been a big change. I think for my teaching, it's changed how I plan a lesson. I spend a lot more time working through lessons, working through ideas with the students in front of me. Instead of going in to a lesson knowing I have to cover 5 pieces of content, I go into the lesson, I tell the kids what they need to learn, and let them tell me what we should focus on. What do you think that we need to work on today? Johanny.
I think that we need to work on the plan
How do you know?
because a lot of people don't feel that good about it.
I completely agree. So I definitely have to be more prepared to think on my feet and to work with them as they're feeding me information. I change my lesson on a minute-to-minute basis. Very rarely do I have a plan that I stick to. You know, if I do one example and they show me on their personal stoplights that they're all on green, I have to be prepared with what to do next. And I can't necessarily have planned it all out before. Show me on your personal stoplights how you feel about the plan room. Interesting. Okay, so I see that some people feel a little bit better now, but some people still feel like we need a couple more examples to talk about it. The same thing if I do an example and they're completely confused, the class is on red, I have to completely change my lesson plan. So I have to be extremely responsive to the students within that lesson. And so some of the advanced planning, it actually reduces a lot of the advanced planning, but you need to know your content really well and know your students really well so that you can change things. Well, I think keen observation of what they're doing is clearly the key to being able to take them on the next steps. It's one of the reasons why I like using the baby whiteboards, for example. You can see exactly what they're thinking when they're thinking it. And especially with a young kid, they can't always explain to you why they're doing something, but you can see them. For instance, today in the math lesson, I saw a lot of kids who I remember yesterday, Laura and I were looking through the work and we were like, why are they doing this? This seems so off base. But when I got a chance to watch them doing it in front of me, I could see that they were skipping to using the inverse operation, and that's where the problem was coming. So in order to do formative assessment well, I think that you really do need to be able to watch them carefully and change as you watch them. Because part of what you're asking them to tell you is what where are your misconceptions? And small children cannot say, here is my misconception. You as the teacher need to be figuring it out as they work. You solving a different problem. I see you smiling. What do you feel? You're starting to feel better. Good, you can move on your stoplight. Draw.
23 strategies. It should be a blue.
What did you just realize there, Jenna?
We took this and put the math. We wanted to end with 7.
You know what you guys are doing?
We were really doing 9 times 9.
Yes, good. The descriptive feedback is really important because it tells the children exactly what they've succeeded in, which criteria they've met, and which criteria they need to work on. And the students are extremely responsive. Children are motivated by different things. I noticed as I was having conversations just in these last couple days, I had one little boy tell me, I said, what have you done in this work? And he said, well, I exceeded the standard because I'm a kid who doesn't normally exceed the standard. So he was motivated by just sort of challenging himself that day. And another kid said to me, well, I exceeded the standard because my mom and my teacher want me to. So they're motivated, whereas other students are motivated by the beauty of the math, the challenge of the problem. But I think that there's no way to motivate them all exactly the same. But with the descriptive feedback, they know what they have to do once they're motivated. And that's why it's so great to have it clearly laid out, is that they can choose a place where they want to do more work, know exactly what they need to do, and also hear from the teacher what is their next step. I noticed that the children are also less dependent on me for praise or encouragement because I'm not providing that as much. They want to know, did I multiply accurately? Not, do you think that I did a good job? And so it's been really nice to notice that they're becoming less dependent on a teacher to give them constant positive reinforcement and more dependent on me to actually give them content information or guidance what to do. And they also rely on their peers for that or the resources around the room. So many times during the day, I can say, well, why don't you go reread the criteria as part of the feedback instead of I'm going to be the keeper of all information and can tell 25 students how to do each and everything better. I can't do that. And so it's nice they take a lot of the responsibility away from me. The culture in my classroom is changed in terms of who's the keeper of the knowledge. The students give me as much information in a lesson as I give them, which they're giving me information about what's hard for them, what they feel good about, what they want to move on, how they think they can succeed. And I'm telling them some information about how to do, some math problems, but I'm not sitting there telling them what they're good at, what they're not good at, or how to get better. They have to tell me what they need. I love using the exit slips because the kids really, the ones that we use today with the different colored dots, the kids see what they need to get better on, and that's their way of telling me what to teach. And I think they feel a lot of ownership. They know that whatever they ask for, I will explain it to them, but they need to ask. I've also noticed that when kids get confused, they'll come to me and say, I'm confused about how to add 3-digit numbers. Can you work with me on that? Instead of just saying, I don't get it, or can you help me? It makes my job a lot easier because I can quickly and specifically teach them a technique. Whereas when a kid comes to you and just says, I don't get it, it's a difficult process to try to figure out what they don't get. So the students sort of keep track on a day-to-day basis of where they need help. The formative assessment has helped me differentiate my instruction in a lot of different ways. First of all, you can quickly take a survey of the class to see where the students fall in terms of mastery of a I can statement or a learning target. And that's, if the students are good at self-assessing, that makes your groups for you in terms of your assessments. If I have the students have personal stoplights, I can easily say to them, if you're on green, you're going to do the following activity. If you're on red, this is your activity. Here's what I think we're going to do. Show me on your personal stoplights, how you feel about the plan room. But it's a much more fluid and also quick way to make groups. It's also interesting to see that with the differentiation, when I have a clear learning target, it makes it much more clear for me to see how to push the top learners and how to remediate for the lowest learners.